Good morning from Vietnam, Colin. Thanks a lot for joining our shows and sharing your stories with our global audience. On behalf of them, I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm certainly looking forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. And it has been 17 years since the last time you joined, you came to my country. So I hope that we're going to be able to bring you here for services our market and seeing you in person sometime soon, all right?
Well, the thing about Vietnam that I remember so well is the vibrant spirit and energy and the quality of entrepreneurship is seems to be culturally embedded in the way people think, operate, function, and that quality of drive, enthusiasm, energy, I think is a standout quality that I think when people even immigrate from Vietnam, they carry with them. And I think this is why Vietnamese culture has had such a positive effect wherever it's gone. And certainly being part of the experience of working there for over a period of 2 years in Ho Chi Minh and up to Hanoi. And I did drive up the coast from Ho Chi Minh all the way up to Hanoi, just as part of the experience of learning about the country. Was an experience I'll never forget because it is such an extraordinarily beautiful, welcoming place. So I'm looking forward to getting back. That's for sure.
So on the road, on your way from Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi, did you stop by Da Nang City?
Yes, I did. Yeah,
That's my hometown.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, I got some suits made in Da Nang. So, and the other thing was the changing food as you go up the coast. It's different cuisine, and of course wherever you go, the famous pho, right? Pho ga is still my favorite food now.
And I reckon the road back then was bad. The condition of the transportation now is a lot better. And I think by the end of this year, we build highway across the country, and it is effective, for about 70% of the whole system. So I think that traveling is now a lot different, a lot better, Colin.
Oh, well, that's good. It was a single road back then, and there was trucks and every single type of vehicle you can imagine, and people living really close to the side of the road as well.
Yep.
Right? And I thought, how dangerous is this? But I'm glad to hear that the infrastructure has improved.
Yes, yes. So, Colin, the talk we are having with you today basically features you and the works that you do. So, we hope that our audience will be able to pick something for them to reflect, to think, to learn, to unlearn, and then to relearn something and apply it to their lives. And so, we thank you for your generosity to spend your time with us. Okay.
Pleasure.
And since you've been in our country, you know that it's our great honor to have you to have introduced about who you are and the works that you do to our audience. Would you please do that?
Well, we're a global training and consulting firm. We're based in Australia. We are a boutique company. Then in that we're not one of the big consulting houses, but our work is very specifically focused at C-suite. So we work mainly with senior executives and boards. And our areas that we specialize in is technology, financial services, pharmaceutical, and cosmetics, interestingly, with one of our major clients being L'Oreal out of France. And our employees are working across the world. So we have members of our team based in Europe, of course, here in Australia, Southeast Asia, and the United States. And our approach is built around the idea of understanding who you are first as a human being is fundamental to your ability to be able to contribute in whatever role that you play. It was in my early 30s that I realized that people that are running big organizations and people at the head of governments or big companies, are human beings. I remember when I was in my early 20s, I thought of these senior executives as somehow different or special, or they had a higher capability than the rest of us mere mortals. Until I realized that they, like everybody, they're just making it up as they go along, right? We all are, right? And the world is such a rapidly evolving, changing place that to be able to respond and lead in such a volatile environment does take a profound sense of understanding of who you are, what your motivational drivers are, and even appreciation of your own psychology. That then allows you to take that into connecting, leading, working with others. And as leadership goes, the idea, of course, is not only to be able to inspire, not only to inform, not only to guide, but also to encourage hundreds, if not thousands of people on a quest or an endeavor to achieve obvious outcomes or goals that have been established either through strategy, in the achievement of corporate or organizational aspiration. But now, these days, purpose is now becoming so much more significant. The role that you play within society, in the community, is as important as the success that you have commercially. And our work is built around a lot of those elements. So we work with individuals, we work with small teams, and occasionally with larger groups. So we provide coaching in a one-to-one capacity, consulting services where we work closely with senior execs in their design of strategy, training, particularly in communication, and the ability to be able to take messages to whatever stakeholder community you choose, your customers, internally, externally. If you're trying to work with governments or partners, how do you communicate more persuasively, effectively, and powerfully? And then finally, we explore the world of personal fortitude or resilience. And we particularly focus on something called adaptation, adaptability. Because if you're going to survive in this crazy world, you've got to be able to evolve rapidly. You don't have lag time. It's speed. And how do you do that and still stay sane is all part of our work. So whilst there's only 30 of us in our business, we have a broader ecosystem of partnerships that we work with, and we've been going for 10 years as a business. My role as an educator, though, is much longer than that. I've been working as an educator for 35 years. I started way back when I was 30 years old. I'm 65 years old now. So I'm an old man, evidently, but I don't feel it. I still in my head, I still think I'm about 35. But as an educator, it's been a wonderful experience to work across the world in over 50 countries with thousands of people. And that's a brief snapshot of who we are and what we do.
Wow, thanks a lot for sharing that, and thanks a lot for being an educator. I think that that is in our culture in Vietnam, having a job working as an educator earn a lot of respect from the people, because that is where our culture is deeply rooted in the respect for the people in that kind of job. So when you come here, you're gonna enjoy the moment of the people welcome and respects and all the the love that they give to people doing your professions and allow me to bring you to different bring us to different point in time in your life. Okay, so when I was young, I wanted to become an astronaut and wearing astronaut suit and jumping different planet and stuff, and life didn't give me anything to do real close to that dream at all. So you have a phenomenal career in educating, training, coaching people for 35, 36 years, right? We want to bring you all the way when you were young. What did you dream about the future when you were young, Colin?
This is where I think I'm so lucky in my life. I grew up in South Africa, Now, South Africa back in the 60s and 70s was and 80s was controlled by a system called apartheid,
Yeah.
Which was essentially a legalized form of slavery, where the vast majority of the population in South Africa were what they described as non-white. In other words, the whites or Caucasians, they're the ones that had all the power, had all the resources, and they're the ones that could vote. 90% of the population had no vote. You could have no choice and decision over your life. So when as a young person growing up in that environment, I was shocked at the treatment that people were receiving purely based on their color or their ethnicity. I went to boarding school, and at boarding school I discovered something at the age of 14 that genuinely shocked me, which was the discovery that the workers at the school who worked on like looking after the grounds and maintenance, and they were mostly Zulu men. This was on the east coast of South Africa, where the Zulu culture is. And I discovered they were literate. These were grown men, and they could not read or write. And the reason is that the South African government had a policy of undereducating non-white people. In other words, made it very difficult for them to get to school. And even when they were at school, their education was substandard to keep them subjugated, to keep them under control. So I went to my headmaster and I said, can you believe that the people that are working here, these grown men, cannot read or write? He goes, I know, it's shocking. And I said, well, it's wrong. He said, and then he asked me this question. Remember, I was 14 years old, and he said, so what are you going to do about it? And I thought, well, I'm 14. I mean, what can I do about it? Well, then I thought, okay. And I had the support of the principal of the school. We found a local organization that did literacy training, and we brought it into our school, and I was the teacher. So at 14 years old, I started my journey as an educator. And I was teaching adult men, 25 adult men, on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights how to read and write. And that was my first exposure to be someone that could pass on skills, knowledge, and capability to others. And so that was the awakening. And I always wanted to be an educator. When I got to university, my parents said to me, don't be a teacher, you won't make money and all that. You know how children are often encouraged to go into professions that their parents want. So I studied law, but it wasn't for me. And I got involved in the anti-apartheid movement. So I was very politically involved, working against the government. I got into a lot of trouble with the police, and I was forced to escape. There was a warrant for my arrest, and I did not want to go to jail because I had destroyed people that I knew that had been arrested, and they were psychologically crushed by the brutality of that experience. So I escaped to the Middle East, and I lived there for 2.5, 3 years, then into Europe, and then Australia gave me a visa to come and live in this part of the world. In my first few years here, though, I had to find jobs, and I worked in radio stations, and I worked in retail for a little bit until I established myself a little. And then at the age of 30, I went back to what my passion and love is, which is education. And so that's how it started for me. So I knew as a child that I wanted to be an educator, and I have done this my entire life.
Wow. And it's surprisingly that our 439 people joining our show, less than 10% of them had the dream, when they were a child, when they were young, match with the career that they are doing, and they've been doing also. So you are one of the lucky person in the 10% of the people that are doing the job that you've been dreamed of when you were young. So and
honestly, it does feel like a blessing, because to this day I don't know how many people I work with who are executives running big businesses. It's not their passion, really. They sort of ended up there. They're the head of finance, or they're the head of something else, and they were, they go, this wasn't really my dream. And then I asked, just like you have, so what was your dream? And a lot of them, it's a long way away from what they're currently doing, but now they're in their 50s or 40s, they have a mortgage and a family, and so they're kind of locked into the economic necessity of their jobs rather than the passion for their work. And for me, this is a bit tragic. This is a bit sad. So again, does that mean that your question now is not whether you're following your passion, but how to find passion in what you're doing? Because if you are doing this, then do it to the best you can, because that's the only way to find that natural fulfillment. Plus, you'll be a better contributor. You'll be a better person for it, rather than regretting that you are doing something that you didn't have the dream or the passion to do. If you are doing what you do it well.
Yeah. I like to bring you to the point in your 30s when you say that at that point you just realize that the people in the C-suite just like anybody else on the planet. And I want to ask that, how did you moving from the from seeing the people at the C-suite is very, very big people into the point that, they just someone just like us. What happened with them?
I was about 34, 35 years old, and my area of expertise as an educator in my first few years was not the conventional route. I had studied law, but I hadn't finished my degree because I had to leave South Africa. In Australia, I had worked in broadcasting and retail and marketing. And so when I started as an educator, I thought, well, I don't have qualifications really. I don't really have much experience in education. I had very little. I had my experience as a kid, but as an adult, no. So how do I become an educator? Like, what do you do? And so I was looking in the newspapers, and who needs a teacher or a trainer or something. And I spotted an advertisement saying, we're looking for someone that can teach computing skills, right? This is way back in the 80s, right? So computers were coming in, and something called desktop publishing, which was Macintosh, Apple Macintosh. But it was an organization called the Australian Quadriplegic Organization, AQA, Australian Quadriplegic Organization. I applied. I went to the interview and I got the job. Now, the reason I got the job is that no one else applied. I was the only person. And the job was to teach people who are paralyzed from the neck down how to use computers by using a mouth stick. They have a stick in their mouth to hit the keyboard. And so my first job as an adult educator was working with people that had no physical ability at all. And I thought, how do you teach somebody who cannot move, who has only head movement and has to use a stick in their mouth? How do you motivate, encourage, inspire? Also, they're taking a lot of medication to control spasms and stuff. So they are compromised even with the drugs and medication they're on. And so this was my first introduction to human spirit, because I met such extraordinarily courageous, happy people who had been in accidents, who had ended up in wheelchairs, completely paralyzed, and yet still had the spirit of life, still had the joy to want to contribute and to learn. And I thought, oh wow, look at this is the human spirit. But then I noticed that a lot of people that were in accidents went to hospital, but when they came out of hospital, there was no program of support to help them back into the community, back into their lives. Right? Remember, now they cannot move, so they're fully dependent on support and care and aid, being fed. They have to be hand-fed. Someone's got to take a spoon of food and, like a child, be fed like this. And so I contacted a man called Christopher Reeve, who was Superman in the movies. And he had a horse riding accident. And he was living in New York, and he was a real advocate for people with spinal cord injury. And so we partnered up together. And I met him, and we spent 6 years developing something called the tertiary rehab program, which is to take people from hospital back into the community. And Christopher Reeve was an educator for me. Now, Christopher, he was paralyzed from here, from the chin down. So he could not feel anything from here down. So he could not breathe without a ventilator. So he had to he was ventilated, had a machine breathing for him. So when you spoke to him, he would speak like this: Colin, it's very good to be able to meet you. And so he had to wait for his lungs to fill up to be able to say the next sentence. This guy was my mentor. Why? Because he taught me. He said, you know what, Colin, I've been a Hollywood rock star, movie star. I've traveled the world, I've done this. I'm now ended up here. Let me give you some advice right now. Nobody anywhere really knows what they're doing. Everybody's just making it up as they go along. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I have met kings and queens. I have met presidents and prime ministers. I have met the CEOs, and so my young mind went, wow, what wisdom. And he said, next time you meet somebody, don't see title, don't see position, don't see status, see the human being. Because you know what? If we get born, we grow up in a family, we get some education, you get into work, you meet somebody, you get married, you might have children, you might buy a house, you might change careers, you might move countries, you get older, children will grow up, they will leave the home, and if you're lucky, you stay with your same partner, and then you'll slowly decline, and then you die. That's it. And I was looking at him going, well, when you describe it just like that, you go, and he said, it's very short, right? It's only short. And so this was the wisdom of the gift I had from Christopher Reeve. Wow. So how lucky am I, and so fortunate to have had that guidance. And then, of course, when I met people from that point on, I only looked at them as people. And then when people get seen beyond their position and beyond their title, they then will become more receptive to who you are, because they feel like they're talking to an equal, right? Because the status is now gone. We're just human beings connecting. And we've taken that philosophy into all our work. We have 3 principles that we work on. Every conversation counts. So every conversation you have with anybody is something that you treat with respect. Doesn't matter who it is or what the context is. And the conversation could be in a shop, buying something from somebody. The conversation could be with someone you meet socially, and of course someone you meet professionally. So every conversation counts. Every meeting matters. So in the work context, don't go into meetings just, because it's another meeting, and my life is just meetings. I go from meeting to meeting to meetings. And a lot of people, that's their jobs. They meet. What do? I meet. I'm a meter. I meet. Now, of course, in those meetings, you're making decisions, you're doing analysis and so on. But every meeting matters. Third principle: make the experience people have of you the highlight of their day. So if you meet somebody and are in a meeting with that person, when they get to the end of their day, they'll remember the meeting they had with you because you made it meaningful. You just didn't show up going through the motions. You weren't just being polite. You weren't just being functionally alert. You made that meeting a highlight of that person's day. Now, if you have that intention, where is your attention? Your attention is on the person that you're communicating with, or the group that you're communicating with. And so your energy is immediately generous. Your quality of your attention is heightened. Your concern and consideration is of contribution. It's not sitting there going, what's in it for me? What do I get out of this? Why am I in this meeting? Thinking about what's in it for you is the opposite of our philosophy. You go into a meeting thinking, what can I contribute? What value can I be here? And look, how you and I have seen this, haven't we? Many, many times, in training environments, you see people sometimes sitting there, looking disinterested, gone off to their happy place, like, waiting to be engaged, waiting to be motivated. Well, if every conversation counts, every moment matters, and you make every interaction the highlight of their day, this is going to bring your presence into full light, into full function. And this then means that whoever you meet, doesn't matter what their status is, you're going to have a quality engagement. And so now you're not going to be intimidated because they're the big boss or the CEO or the president or whatever. They're just human beings and navigating the few decades that we have and trying to do it as well as they can. And I think this mindset is something we should encourage anyone and everyone to have. So that's the philosophy of how I got to. It's a long answer, sorry, but
it's a very beautiful answer. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Colin, because that 3 principles that you share is very important. And then it makes a person become so pleasant every chance that we be able to talk to work with, and if any of us, if every one of us can do that, imagine how beautiful the workplace would be, how beautiful the community we can have, and how beautiful the world could be, right? Every conversation counts, every meeting matters, and then make the experience they have with us become a highlight of their days. And when we when we meet the people like that, like I'm meeting with you, definitely my day will be so exciting. I will be sharing the stories with the people around, right? And go back to your mentor, Christopher. Is that the Superman that he ride the horse and he fell off and got paralyzed his body? Was that him?
Yeah, so he was the first actor to be Superman in the movies. All right, so and Christopher Reeve, and so he was a Hollywood actor, a superstar, really. I think he got an Oscar. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he got an Oscar.
Yeah, he got an Oscar. And so here's a world famous movie star who loved riding horses. And one day, riding along, the horse stumbled. He fell. He landed on his head, and he broke his neck. And of course, that second of his life changed him forever, right? Of course, he's now in a wheelchair with this level of paralysis. So the break was right up here in the back of his spine. Now, here's a man who was told by the conventional medical belief of the day that he would never be able to feel anything, move anything, breathe, and so on. So, because all the science had determined that once you've had a spinal cord injury, that's it. There's no cure. So he didn't believe that. He thought, no, I'm going to find a cure. And he raised millions and millions and millions of dollars. And he died of a heart attack, sadly at a young age. But you know what? He had defied all medical knowledge and understanding because he had started to feel underwater. He had started to move his own legs. It's when he was a miraculous guy, a miraculous man. So again, who decides what's the right way? Who sets the standards? Who defines what convention is? It's like work. Who decided that this is how we should work? Right? Who came up with weekends and Monday to Friday and 9 till 5? I mean, everything's just made up. People have just made this up. And then they've said, this is what work is, or this is what life is. So we love the idea of 3 dynamics when it comes to culture. There's cultural compliance. So you comply to the culture of the place you were born into, the religion you grew up in, the family system that you were raised in, and so on, the language, etc. That's cultural compliance. Then there's cultural consideration. We consider differences in different cultures, including workplaces. That culture is how you do things around here, if you want to define it simply. But cultural consideration is respect, tolerance, curiosity. So why do some cultures have a different belief system than others? We can criticize it, but that doesn't make things better. How do we try and understand its origins, or where it came from, or how it's emerged and evolved? And consideration and is respectful. Then the third one, which is the one we're most interested in, cultural creation. How do we create the right culture that ensures workplaces become a place where people thrive, where respect is the norm, where opportunity for self-expression is natural, where it's not compliance and control. It's more to do with choice and contribution, right? Who decides this? Well, leaders decide this, or innovators decide this, entrepreneurs decide this. Now in our world, with technology being allowing us to connect with anybody, anywhere, at any time, where we have the world's knowledge in our device, right? I have the knowledge of the world in this little thing right here. I can access any content. What's the culture that we need that's going to allow for the emerging generations to live peacefully, not be living under the constant anxiety of war, where the planetary decay through the exploitation of our natural ecosystems and all of that? That's cultural creation. So we've got these three elements: compliance, consideration, creation. And think about the work that we do in support of leaders is, where are they weighted right now? You meet some people that are still stuck in compliance mindsets. They still believe in hierarchy, in command and control, micromanaging, putting too many constraints around people's ingenuity and freedom. These are old style companies. They're going to die really, really quickly. Cultural consideration means that we need to understand diversity and inclusion. We need to respect alternative points of view. We need to be curious. And then, of course, creation is where, and what the world's craving right now, right, is who are going to be the ones that are going to take us out of the mess that we have. Our social divide that is built around the current economic models that are, we don't have a bell curve. We have a U curve. We get more people are getting rich on one hand and more people are getting poor on the other. The middle is in fact declining. We're getting more and more people that are going into poverty, hunger and deprivation, and we get these so many people now that are multi-billionaires. This gap is not sustainable. How do we get back to the bell curve where we have less people poor, less people super rich, and a greater community of benefit for everybody? We need a culture that can create that. How do we get rid of the industrial war machine that supports the military, that creates the weaponry, that needs war to flourish and survive, and that has been around since human beings have been trying to live together? Because when we run out of words, we start killing each other. I mean, can we believe it? We've still got tanks and guns and young men shooting at each other in Ukraine right now. I mean, you know, when I see the images of those soldiers, and all I have to do is in my mind make it black and white, and what am I looking at? Is World War II. It's the same pictures. Young men going to kill other young men because idiotic individuals are deciding the fate of the planet, right? So we need a different culture. And part of the work that you and I do is how to create organizations, companies, businesses that can start to foster that collective cultural creation that will create a better community, better world, better society. And I'm optimistic that this is definitely possible. I have an endless belief in the goodness of human beings.
Wow.
And it comes back to people like Christopher Reeve, right? Here's a movie star that fell off a horse but became an inspiration to millions, not because of his acting, but because of his doing as a human being.
Wow. And thanks for sharing that, culture perspective that you just shared from the compliance to consideration to creation. And to me, culture is a made up of, is something that made up by many individuals, right? So if we can individually transform from compliance to consideration to creations, and then we can, we can be part of something that build something new in our culture. That brings me back to the fascinating thing that you did, Colin, and it's the moment that you create the future for yourself by connecting with Christopher Reeves, right? So you've been living in South Africa, then tried to run away from the country, went to the Middle East, then went to Europe, got the visa, going to Australia, and established your education, professions from scratch there. How did you be able to connect to Christopher Reeve, yourself to create your future back then, though? Tell us. That was years ago, right?
It's you know, it's always fascinating when we think about the world that we live in right now. Like if I want to contact somebody, as you did to me, right? You go on LinkedIn, you go, hi, hello, can we talk? Right? It's much easier now.
Yeah.
Back then, this was at the beginning of even email. I mean, this is how long ago this was. But of course, I had the authority to contact him because I was part of the Australian Quadriplegic Association. So I said, I am an educator in the Australian Quadriplegic Association. I have a concern about the support people have out of hospitals with quadriplegia. I would love to get your point of view and to have a conversation with you, a telephone call, to discuss what you can share with me that I could apply here in Australia. Because maybe there are programs in America that I can't find in my research, but you being so well connected, maybe you can help me. And I sent him a letter. I mean, it was a physical letter, and he wrote back, right? Or he had someone write back on his behalf, saying thank you for the letter. Let's set up a telephone call and let's have a conversation. It was as simple as that. I just simply asked. Now I may not have got a response, and my life might have been different, but he did. He did respond, and I think he responded because my question was dealing with how to support people with injury to have better lives, which is his passion. So it was right in his sweet spot in regards to the things that he cared about most. The culmination of our work was that Christopher Reeve came to Australia, and we had a conference in Sydney at the convention centre. We had 2,000 participants, or 2,500 people attended this conference. It was on spinal cord injury. And here was the most amazing thing. 1,000 of the delegates were people in wheelchairs. It was the largest gathering of people in wheelchairs ever in the world for this conference. And I mean, you can just think of the logistics, right? We had to have ramps everywhere and disabled toilets and carers, because we had some people that were severely disabled and were fully dependent on respirators and machines to, keep them alive, as well as carers to be there in support. But it was such an amazing moment to stand on the stage in front of this big audience and to talk about the rights of people who, through bad luck, through sometimes no fault of their own, have ended up profoundly disabled through paralysis and accidents. Others are born into bodies that are genetically compromised, and again, no fault of their own, they find themselves living in a body that just doesn't function. Where is their contribution and opportunity in the world? That was the theme of the conference. So, just that one little letter. So then it comes back to another principle. Ask. Right? If you want to get something done, ask. And don't be afraid. right? If you're going to ask somebody, go to the top, right? What's the worst that can happen? Is nothing. That's the worst. Nothing. They won't respond. And in this case, I was lucky. But in the past, I have reached out to leaders and prime ministers and other, people, and have asked, and I have had no response. Doesn't matter. But at least you ask. So again, when young people come to me and say, Colin, you're sort of 65 now. Well, what's some advice you can give me in my early career? And one of the ones is to say, don't be afraid to ask. Reach out and request, but make sure you're coming from good intention. Yet your intention is not self-serving. It's not about you. It's about what you can contribute and what benefit can you be to them. It's not always about trying to get what you want. Think about what you can give. So ask with good intention. My second piece of advice is always say yes. If someone asks you to do something, say yes to it. Because the yes means that you will try, you will explore, that you won't, I don't know. Now, of course, when I say yes, you don't say yes to everything. Like someone says, have you ever tried heroin? No, you'd say no to that, of course, right? So you have boundaries. But in terms of your profession, in terms of your work, in terms of opportunities, say yes. And there's such a wonderful liberation in this, because it'll sometimes take you to places you would not have thought of before, experiences you may not have even conceived of. In fact, that's how I got to Vietnam. Colin, would you like to come and work for a cement company in Vietnam? It's outside of Ho Chi Minh, near the Cambodian border. This was from the Australian government. Consulate, the consulate in Vietnam was providing training for local Vietnamese businesses, and it was part of Australia's contribution to supporting the growth of Vietnam. And they got training providers like myself, and of course I said yes. Right? I didn't know anything about cement. I didn't know anything about manufacturing in Vietnam. I didn't know anything about Vietnam at that point, apart from limited history. But that yes was wonderful, right? It took me into a new country, new culture, new experiences. It was great, right? And that's the power of yes. So have the courage to ask with good intention, and and always answer with an intelligent yes, a considered yes.
Thanks a lot for sharing that, Colin. And earlier, when Christopher told you that nobody anywhere knows what they do, right? And go to the stage that we are now. Everything is so easy to be connected. Went to LinkedIn, you want to talk to somebody, and then just go LinkedIn and ask for it with good intention also, right? But not a lot of people is doing that also. We all want to create something for our life, but we don't do the action, that the asking, the connecting, and then making it happen. So that's part of the purpose what we run in this show, to tell to share that it's possible. Everything is possible. If I could do that, you could do it a lot better than me. You can meet a lot more amazing people than me. All you need to do is just try to do. That's it. Right? And look at your life phenomenally. The moment that you asked Christopher to join, right? And then everything changed, really changed into the very new and beautiful directions also. Tell us, how can, from the moment that he said yes to you, respond to your mail, talk to you, how can you retain that relationship and make it to the next level? Though it's not hard, it's not easy. Sorry.
No, well, again, it's always about context. So if we go back all those years ago, when people coming out of hospital, to give you the context, let's say a young man on the weekend decides he's going to go to the beach, and he's sitting on the beach with his friends, and they have a few beers and they're having a good time, and it's really hot, And the young guy says, okay, I'm going to go for a swim. And he runs down the beach and he dives underneath the waves. But there's a sandbank, and he hits the sandbank and he breaks his neck. And now he floats up to the surface. He can't feel his body. He gets dragged to the beach. He gets taken to the hospital. He will spend 10 months on average in hospital trying to stabilize his condition. And in those days, you now finally stabilized. You've had your 10 months in hospital. You get given a wheelchair. Your family come and they push you out of the hospital. And now you've got to start your life again. There was nothing that was available to support people, or very little to support people. So that when there's a huge need, that's why the work with Christopher became so easy, because there was a desperate need to create a program of support for transitioning from hospital back into life, into community. Some of these people would be insured, right? They would have insurance, and they would suddenly they'd be wealthy because it was an accident and someone was liable, and they get $3 million because of the accident. Now suddenly you've got $3 million, you're paralyzed. I don't know how to manage money, right? So what happens then? And so on. So in other words, when there's a real need, very pressing need, that's the opportunity space. And now you think about anything that you do in any organization or any business or any context, where are the opportunities? And when you find that opportunity, that's where you can bring your talent, your knowledge, your skill to at its best. Then, and importantly, you will find collaborators. Who can you bring with you that can help you in that regard? And I think this is where entrepreneurs, both commercial and social entrepreneurs, really become the drivers of change in the world. They see the world through different eyes because they only see opportunity. Then they have the ability to encourage, engage, and invite others to be part of their contribution to that opportunity, to meet that opportunity. So if I go back to that first letter, the letter was the ask. Then the opportunity was identified, and then the work began to be able to meet that need, which is really what the work we did. And now if you think of any business, that's exactly what happens, right? There's an opportunity, someone has a need, and then you either make a product, build a service, make something, offer something that meets that need, and that is called the market. And then you build something around. You've done it yourself. All right. 2019, you started your business. You've already had hundreds of people that you've spoken to in that very short period of time through a pandemic, right? And how have you done it? You've asked.
Yep.
It's pretty straightforward. And but so you are a living example of what we've been talking about in our conversation, right? You're living the messages I've been sharing with you. And and of course, I trust and hope that others will hear this and apply it to themselves as well, because it's not complicated.
It's not.
Human beings, we've been around for thousands and thousands of years, generation after generation after generation. Essentially, the pattern is still the same: birth, some sort of education, do some work and contribution, maybe family if that's part of the story. Then there'll be the decline, and then there'll be the death. That's it. How do you make that time meaningful?
Yep.
Technology has changed the game, and the world's easier to get around, but it's still fundamentally the same.
Yep.
Living a life of meaning. Pablo Picasso said, the purpose of your life is to find what you're good at, find what you really enjoy, find what you're good at. The meaning of your life is giving it to other people.
Yep.
Is to share that passion and what you're good at with other people. So your purpose is to find what you want to do and love, and your meaning is the giving of this, the generosity of it. But not everyone finds their purpose. But you know what? You can still give. You can still find meaning in what you're doing. And ultimately, I think that's a life well lived.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I have two last questions for you, Colin, before we end the conversation today. So the first question is regarding to thinking. My wife and I are in the process of learning how people think, because we have a belief in that our ability to think these days diminishing, not increasing. So every chance that we talk to people who good at thinking, who help people to think, who help people to expand their ability to think, we ask this question. So Colin, how have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think?
Oh, wow. I've never ever stopped learning.
Mm.
Is, on my phone, I listen to audiobooks.
Mm.
So if I go to my Audible library, you'll you'll see I have, you can't see it all, but I've just got,
We saw it.
I must have, I've got about 40 books on my Audible library at the moment. And so I am constantly educating myself, right? So I'm learning. So at the moment, I'm listening to a book that I have read before. It's called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Dr. Robert Cialdini.
Cialdini.
And yeah, and it's a book that's been around for a long time. But it's certainly, again, it's just reminding me of the importance of fundamental communication techniques. And even though I have read the book before, I'm now getting more distinctions and lessons and layers that are associated with it. So the idea of Audible books is that I always listen to stuff, like if I'm in my car or even when I'm exercising, I have an opportunity to keep my mind engaged through learning. Now, I also listen to fiction, of course. I'm not always listening to non-fiction and heavy, technical books. I keep my mind engaged that way. Curiosity is always a wonderful quality to have, to keep curious. So, for example, at the moment in the conversation around pronouns, I don't know if this is an issue in Vietnam, but in the West now, they're talking about, are you male or female or other, right? And they have this he, she, and people are identifying themselves by their pronouns. Now I'm he, him, and someone says I'm he, she, and some people go, no, I'm neither of those. I'm them, they. I'm not male or female. And this is freaking people out, right? People are going, this is just ridiculous. I mean, there's only two genders, blah, 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 blah. And there's lots of anger and passion around it. Well, rather than getting angry, get curious. How come this is emerging right now? What is the underlying contributing forces in young people that is causing them to even question the value of an gender identity, when everywhere in nature this is not an issue? Only in human beings is this a concern. There's something more complicated, Well, this causes you to stay thinking rather than in the opposite of thinking, which is judging. And judgmentalism is linked to fundamentalism. And fundamentalism is the tyranny of the single thought. There's only one way. That's why I'm really scared about religions. Because religions go, there's one God and there's one way and it's my way. And if you don't obey, you will be punished. Right? This is the extreme Christian worldview, fundamentalist Christian, fundamentalist Islamic view, fundamentalist Judaic view, fundamentalist Buddhist even, right? It has violence in it. So for me, rather than judgmentalism, curiosity replaces it, and this keeps my mental dexterity, my intellectual curiosity alive. When I think I have a fixed position or a point of view, there's part of me that goes, I could be wrong. I may not know the full picture, and that keeps me open. So I'm always scared when I feel like I've got a fixed view, because I might go, what am I not seeing? But at the same time, I do have strong opinions. I have a point of view, and you will have to convince me otherwise, but I'll listen. I will stay open to it. I won't defend my position with violence. or I won't force you to bend to my position. If you don't, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
Because that's, and when I say kill you, I mean that also metaphorically. Like I'll exclude you from my tribe or excommunicate you from my community. So yeah, there's a lot of that around at the moment, and so there's almost there's a bit of a culture of fundamentalism that scares me. But all of this is what keeps me curious.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. So never stop learning is your fundamental, and then keep your minds open for and be curious about how things go around. So that is how you help yourself to expand your ability to think. And I go to the last question. So we knew your past. You live in South Africa, and then you fled the country, go into different, part of your life. Then living the past 35 years in education again, doing the works for yourself. We want to head to the future a little bit. Okay, is there anything Colin is working on that exciting, and you want to share with us that we can celebrate with you in advance?
Mahatma Gandhi talked about the stages of life, and the the early stages is around learning and knowing, finding out who you are. Then the middle part of your life is around being productive, right? It's your work and productivity and doing, building, making, contributing, and so on. And then the third part of your life is now contribution, or what you give back, what you give back. And I'm kind of moving to the third part now of my life. So I think the area of passion for me now is working with other educators. I love sharing techniques, methodology, how to be a better educator. So, for example, in our session today, I've been talking to you, and you'll notice I've been talking about here. I've got 3 things, or I've got these 2 things, and you'll see I'm doing this with my hands. So I'll go, so cultural compliance, cultural consideration, and cultural creation. So what am I doing? I'm going 1, 2, 3, but I'm also going from left to right, from your perspective, not my perspective. I'm going backwards for me, but I know this is how you code content on a left to right continuum, because that's how you write. But I am, in fact, physically doing this backwards for me. But as an educator, I know how you are seeing me and how you are digesting what I'm sharing with you, that will stick in your mind more powerfully than if I did it this way. Cultural compliance, cultural consideration, cultural creation, which is my left to right, but it's backwards for you now. So that's a technique. Now, a lot of people don't know these techniques. And so I have something called the Colin James method, which is the methodology that we apply to education and learning. And so that's certainly where I'm going to put a lot of my attention in the next 5 years, is devoting my time on working with educators. And not with businesses so much anymore, not with C-suite, CEOs, boards, and so on, but more to do with people that love and share the craft of what you and I do, which is education.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing that, and thanks a lot for dedicating the upcoming years, helping educators to get better at what they do and share your practices and stuff, so they can join you in the journey of helping people to grow and be better at themselves. So it's a wonderful conversation today. I learned a lot from your sharing. I learned a lot about your story, and I got a lot of more admiration for you for the courageous that you gave to yourself, asking the questions and dedicating your life when you were very young, teaching people, educating people, and leave that path. That's a very beautiful and noble path, Colin. So
Thank you.
yeah, so I thank you for joining our show and all the insight that you share with us. I wish you well. I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you in Vietnam again one day soon. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you very much for joining. You have a beautiful week. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.